I think God's given us a chance today to overcome and to loosen the grip of anxiety. In 2012, there was a profound shift that happened on the American landscape. And really every study across the board showed this massive uptick in self-harm and fear and anxiety and depression. And I don't mean just like a little uptick. I'm talking across the board. Every study shows 30 to 40% increase in all of it. And you might be thinking, okay, what happened in 2012? Okay, was that the advent of the smartphone? No, that came earlier. What happened in 2012 is that's actually when social media became part of the very fabric of the American ethos. Now, I want to be careful. I'm not talking just in this moment about Christian worldview. I'm just talking about just mainstream data, sociologists, people that study human behavior and human flourishing and mental health. And my point, really, if in case you doze off these next few minutes, my point today is not to be like, it just is what it is. So we just got to deal with it. No, my point today is to remind us that God's in the middle of all of it. He's present, or at least present in all of it. And what I mean by that is, in particular, in the spaces and the places that we cultivate anxiety, God moves towards us. In particular, when we create structures and we embrace systems that create and cultivate deeper anxiety in our life, God moves towards us in those moments so that he might set us free. Now, just heads up here, I'm not speaking as a clinician. I don't have a PhD behind my name. I am speaking as somebody that has like real experience though with anxiety, with somebody that has had long seasons of having, feels like a cloud has followed me, feels like, I don't mean just like I trip and fall and I've had a blue day. I mean trip and fall, you fall into a hole. And then you don't really know how to get out of the hole. And you're not sure there is a light at the end of the tunnel. I mean, so profound have these moments been in my life that if you were to come into, my home during those days or weeks, or you were to show up at my office and you were like, hey, I've got a word for you. It's a word from God, and I know it's God. God's confirmed it. And the word is, God's going to put you on a path, and he's going to put you in rooms like this filled with people, and you're going to get to teach and preach the gospel and talk about what it means to flourish under the banner of God's goodness. And then God's going to give you friends, and you're going to be healthy, and you're going to have people that see you and know you and walk with you, and there's going to be parts of your life you didn't even think about, and God's going to cause those areas to flourish. So there's the word. And I'd be like, thank you so much for that word. God bless you in that. But I've got more faith to believe that I'm going to sprout wings out of my butt and fly a unicycle up to the moon. Like that's what happens when you have anxiety. Anxiety, it distorts reality. And even if it's true, and it's certainly true from heaven, but even if it's true in the sight of everybody else, you and I cannot see it. And so I tell you that because if you're here in a moment like just this moment, or you've been in a season where you're like, it's been too long, and I'm not sure freedom and this idea of overcoming is even possible for me, I just want to throw out a couple ropes for us, a couple handles. And one of those is just to tell you, like, you're not crazy. And then secondly, just to tell you that God will walk with you through it. So first, you're not crazy. You might feel like you're out of your mind sometimes. You might have some crazy symptoms going on in your body, but you're not crazy. And then secondly, God will walk with you through it. You mean you might be in the darkness, but I'm reminded of Psalm 139. Darkness is not dark to God. And so he walks with us in the darkness to take you and I to a place of light. And really the hope today is in the middle of this is not to talk about the hows. I mean, hows are important. How do you get out of darkness? How do you How do you manage? How do you overcome anxiety? And the hows are important, but really what I want to talk about these next few minutes, I just want to talk about the who. Again, the hows are okay. There are some tools. There are some resources, counseling, even medication if you need to get to that space. Yes, to the hows. But really, I want to talk about the who, because the who, when you and I have an experience and honestly, when we build our life around deep surrender to the creator of the universe and his son, Jesus, it's the who that moves us to a place of freedom. It's the who that brings us out of darkness and into his wonderful light. This is what Psalm 23 is talking about. Maybe the most famous passage in the Old Testament. Listen to what David says. He says, "The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me through paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil." Why won't I fear evil? Is it because I've got the tools, because I've got the handbook, because somebody's given me some really good advice, because I've gone to counseling? I mean, again, the hows are fine, but how does he lead us out of evil? He says, "Because you are with me." And I'm telling you, when this got down in my bones, and honestly, when it goes down in my bones, because I'm a forgetful person, this is when shifts happen for me. I remember when I first became a Christian, some of you know I grew up in a non-religious Jewish home and got radically saved in high school, got rescued by Jesus. And I remember my first church experience, First Baptist Church, Pompano Beach, Florida. And I remember sitting in this 10th grade boys' Sunday school room, okay, in the basement, a ratty VCT tile, and the picture of Jesus on the wall. Anybody, if you grew up in an old Baptist church, anybody, the old picture of Jesus on the wall? And I mean like the Olin Mills picture of Jesus. Right? Where, they set him up and they're like, okay, we want your, chin right here. And his long, blonde, flowing hair is, in the wind. And he's got his, neatly pressed bathrobe on. And he's got a lamb on his shoulder, and he's looking up, and clearly he is just connecting with the Father. And we're like, and I'm a new Christian, and I'm like, that's our guy. That is the leader. That's our hero, and true. But when a little later in life, when I really fell into the hole of anxiety, when I fell into moments of depression, when I just felt completely disillusioned in my emotions, I realized that that Olin Mills Jesus really wasn't going to be enough for me. He wasn't gonna have what I ultimately needed, and the reason is because when I was in that hole, like I needed the God of power. I needed the God who had everything in his resource to rescue me out of darkness. And then I started opening the Bible as a new Christian, and I realized, okay, Jesus actually calls himself a good shepherd. He's the good shepherd, and which I needed a good shepherd because I also knew I had an enemy, and the enemy was out to steal, kill, and destroy me. And yet Jesus has come to rescue me as a sheep. Now, again, I don't know when God calls you a sheep. If you ever read the Bible, one of the things that God refers to you and I is as a sheep, and which is not a great compliment. Okay, and there's a lot of reasons, but it's not necessarily a compliment. I mean, he's not like, you guys are so cute and furry and soft, and I love to nestle up next to. No, sheep, among other things, we're not the smartest animals on the planet. We're made in God's image, but we're not smart. And I know that because if you read anything about sheep, what they don't know is they've got like a 20-pound cotton pillow around their neck. And when they go to a rushing river and they stick their head in that rushing river to take a drink, that 20-pound cotton pillow turns into an 80-pound sog that drags them into the river that will kill them. And our good shepherd, who's got a staff, I know he's got a staff because I first saw it in the old Mills picture. He takes that staff and he puts it around the neck of the sheep and he rescues that sheep out of the rushing water. And he gets it up on dry ground and he says, hello, I'm the one that rescued you. And if you'll allow me, I don't want to just rescue you. I want to lead you as a good shepherd to still waters. Let's do one more verse. This is really where I've been living for a while. I want us to hold on to this together. 1 Peter 5. Beginning with verse 6, it says this. This is Peter reminding us that God is our protector. He says, humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so that at the proper time he may exalt you, casting all of your anxieties on him because he cares for you. Now, what we generally do with our anxiety is we either ignore it, or we deny it, or we feed it. But Peter's like, there's actually only one thing that we're supposed to do with our anxiety is we're supposed to give it over. We're supposed to cast it off on the only one that is able to carry it. So some of you know this. About 4 months ago, my dad passed away. And then very few of you know this, just those that I'm in community with and our staff. But then 3 weeks ago, my mom passed away. And so I've been in a hole of grieving. And you know what grief does? Grief, it causes your emotions to swirl, and you're not really sure up from down. And I tell you that because when my dad died, both of these kind of came out of the blue. When my dad died, my wife, who some of you know, fourth row, amazing. She's in that season these last 4 months, she has been so kind and attentive and tender. And when my dad died, she just moved in. She's like, how can I help? What can I do? How can I minister to you? How can I love you? How can I meet these needs? And I didn't know. I mean, when you're grieving, you don't know. You don't know what to do. You don't know what to expect. You don't know what you need. And so she's doing all the right things. Everything was right. And in the middle of it, I'm like so frustrated and angry with her because I'm just like, why don't you know what to do? And then we sort of got through it, and then my mom passes away a few weeks ago, and so you would imagine in that moment, okay, she's now going to be on firmer ground because she's like, well, at least I know what to expect. I know I'm going to know how to minister to John. I'm going to know how to love him. I'm going to know how to meet some of these needs. You would think that, okay? And again, she did everything right. But because my mom was a different person, and it means I grieved in a different way, and I grieved in a deeper way because it was my mom. And so, like, I'm in the middle of this grieving, and I'm like infuriated because I'm like, she should read my mind. She should know what to do, how to comfort me. But then there's this moment where you get a little bit of clarity and you realize she's not actually designed to meet those deepest needs. She can't do it. There's no human on the planet that in our time of grief, our time of loss, our time of emotional disillusionment, where we can look to them and say, you have to carry this weight. Because she's not meant to carry that weight. And this is what Peter's getting at. Peter's like, there's a weight that we carry in our anxiety The weight is not the anxiety. The weight is the source of the anxiety, whatever that weight is. And you cannot expect anybody else, and you cannot expect yourself to carry that. And so what you have to do with that weight is you have to cast it off on the only person that can carry it. That's right. And so Peter, he says, humble yourself, therefore under the mighty hand of God. Now the way I read that, when it says humble yourself, I think it's this confession of I can't. Like, I am unable to carry this. It's not even like I'd like to carry it, or, one day I will be strong enough to carry it, but it's the confession, I'll never be able to. I was not made. I wasn't created to carry this. And so the reason it's an act of humility is because we're confessing our weakness. And we're confessing that someone else is stronger and will always be stronger than us. And so I'm just confessing I can't, someone else can. But here's the thing, you got an option. Is you can either humble yourself or, check this out, you can be humbled. You can humble yourself or you can be humbled. Those are the only two options, and I'm hoping you've got at least a little bit of discernment where you can say, I think I know what the better option is. Because to be humbled is to knowingly say, I know I'm not meant to carry this. In fact, it is poison for me, but I'm going to choose to carry it, knowing somewhere down the line, this weight is going to inevitably and eventually crush me up underneath of itself. And I'm going to be on my back. So I can either humble myself or I can be humbled, but one way or the other, humility is coming. The pain of life, the loss of life, the disillusionment of circumstances, one way or another, it will take you back down to the first floor. Let me say this to everyone. You and I, one way or the other, we're going to surrender. We're either going to surrender to the one who can carry us, or we're going to surrender to the weight that will crush us. And so what does Peter say? How do we get there? Well, he says, cast your cares. Cast our cares. Now, this is going to be silly for you, or for me, because you may know me. I'm not a fisherman. I first read that, and I'm like, oh, Peter's using fishing language. Though I don't think they had a rod and reel 2,000 years ago, so I don't think he was like, cast it. But that's how I first read it, so just forgive me. But it made sense to me. I was like, yeah, when you go on a boat and you've got a rod and reel and you're going fishing, that's what you do. You cast it. It's like going away from you. And that metaphor at least works for a moment, because in a moment of clarity or a moment of courage, a moment of humility, when you and I will cast our cares, and we're like, these are not mine to carry, I'm going to cast them away from me. In a moment, we start feeling better. We start feeling lighter. The clouds begin to part. Light begins to enter our life again. And then we become really dumb. And we're like, I'm feeling stronger all of a sudden. And so wherever we cast our anxiety, then we just walk back over to our anxiety and we pick it right back up. But for me, the way that now more accurately, when I read it, it's not clean. Like casting our anxieties on God, it's not clean. It's not like, God, here are my anxieties. I have numbered them. I have put them in alphabetical order. Got a spreadsheet for you. And here they are. Because I respect your time, God. And so I just want to, here they are. And I've numbered them in order of weight. And so if you can maybe start working on that. But I tell you, when I feel better, I'll come get these. You're going to be the placeholder for my healing, but ultimately it's going to be me that does the healing. So if you can go and hold it until then, like it's not clean like that. I mean, it's like mud just gets up on you. It's like I remember walking into my stepfather years ago. My mom and my stepdad owned some rental property, and I remember I was in middle school. We walked into one of these properties, And the owner or the renters, they had broken the lease because they had like 8 dogs in the house. Probably some cats too. And I know that because it smelled like 8 dogs and some cats, and there were fleas everywhere. You ever walk into a house where there are thousands of fleas? I mean, you see them jumping. And when I walked in, they're getting up on me. And you don't care about what you look like in that moment. You know, like, is there a way that I can look good and get the fleas off at the same time? No, you act like an idiot. You're like, oh my God, you're getting the fleas off. It's like that person you see in the park and you're like, are they having a seizure? No, there's a bee. There's like whatever, you're like, you don't know what's going on. And this is how I think about casting our cares. It's not messy. People are looking at you going, what is going on? But you're like, whatever it takes to get all of this off me, this is not meant to be on me. So you're just casting it off. You're going to great lengths, spending enormous amounts of energy, just like casting it off, casting it off. Casting off, but you're not just casting it off, you're casting them on someone. The only one that is able to carry your anxiety. Now, I want to put a parenthesis here because I don't want to minimize anxiety in a sense that what you're anxious over doesn't matter. Nobody in the room is anxious over silly things. There is a substance behind your worry, and it's usually our children, or it's a diagnosis, or it's the health of our marriage, or it's a wayward child, or it's about our financial future. There are any number of things that become the source for our anxiety. I don't want to minimize that, but when we cast off our cares on the only one that can care for us, really what we're saying is I'm refusing to upload the responsibility for the outcome of my life. I can take ownership over my decisions, but I am not the one that's ordering the steps of my life. I am not the one who is directing my paths. I'm not the one who is creating with a creative goodness the end of my life. Only one person's doing that. And so I'm relenting the responsibility of what the end of my story is going to look like. Because that's too much weight for you and I to carry. Just a couple of promises that I love, and this is what I've been holding on to. Let's keep reading. He says, this is 1 Peter 5, verse 6. He says, humble yourself, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so that at the proper time he may exalt you, casting all of your anxieties on him because he cares for you. So promise number 1 is that he will lift you up at the proper time. Now, you might be feeling like, and I've certainly been in this space, you may be feeling like your feet are mired in mud at this present time. But there is coming a time and a perfect time when God's going to throw you a grace rope. And he's going to lift you up out of that, and he is going to exalt you to solid ground. The other promise, and this is really how you know you're coming to the finish line or you're coming to light out of darkness, is that you begin to see that God cares for me. That's the promise. God cares for me, and he cares about you. Now, again, this is not to minimize the reality that he cares about the things going on in your life. I mean, clearly, he cares about the stuff. He cares about the weight that you're carrying that is the substance of your anxiety. He cares for you in that. But the moment we cast our cares on him, the light breaks in, and we get a little bit of a revelation. And the revelation, I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but in that moment, you're like, why am I freaking out? Why am I freaking out over this? I mean, the God of the universe is with me. And he is a father over me. This is the God who rules all things. This is the God who is sovereign over every single thing. And the smallest molecule that is at the farthest edge of the universe, he commands it with a word. And so how much more is this God who rules all things and he cares for me, will he not take care of me? And all that means for us is when anxiety comes calling, you and I can whisper right at it, Yahweh cares for me. Yahweh cares for me.